Okay, so this week we are going to be talking about the weather in February. So we're going to be talking about the usual, kind of normal, over the last 10 years, kind of weather pattern that you can expect when traveling in New Zealand in February. Obviously, we have had some extreme weather around the tail end of January, and the weather is still really wet for February, as it's supposed to be summer. But throughout this live show, we're going to be talking about February. But first up, let's check out some of the comments that we have. All right, everybody, we are going to be starting with our weather coverage for February in New Zealand with the typical temperatures in New Zealand. Laura, let's get started. All right, ta-da! Okay, so in New Zealand, the weather in February is a summer weather, right? Something that people need to be aware of is that, we have the opposite season than in the Northern Hemisphere. So the temperature in New Zealand will be able to reach as high as 25 degrees Celsius, which is 77 degrees Fahrenheit, and as low as 10 degrees Celsius, which is 50 degrees Fahrenheit in like the really cooler night. If you go over Northland region, which is the top of the North Island of New Zealand, it can go as high as 30 degrees Celsius, which is 86 degrees Fahrenheit, quite regularly around the month of February. So because New Zealand has a lot of different climate, it's surrounded with water, let's go over the different regions and let's go over the typical temperatures for New Zealand in February. And those are averages over the last 10 years. So let's start with Northern New Zealand, which is Northland, Auckland, Tauranga. And that will be about 20 degrees Celsius, which is about 68 degrees Fahrenheit. In central North Island, which is Hamilton, Taupo, and Rotorua, that will be 18 degrees Celsius, which is around 64 degrees Fahrenheit. If we look at the southwest North Islands, that's New Plymouth, Palmerston North, and even Wellington, that will be around 18 degrees Celsius, which is 64 degrees Fahrenheit on average in February. When we're looking at the eastern North Island, that would be Gisborne, Napier, and Wairarapa. That will be about 20 degrees Celsius, which is 68 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, so let's move on with the average temperature on the South Island of New Zealand. Starting with the northern South Island, with the town of Blenheim, Nelson, that's usually around 18 degrees Celsius, which is 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Sorry, that's so many numbers, guys. Then we're having the western Southland, which is Westport, Hokitika, Milford Sound. Then we're talking about 15 degrees Celsius, which is 59 degrees Fahrenheit. In the eastern South Islands, which is Kaikoura, Christchurch, and Timaru, we're looking at 18 degrees Celsius, which is 64 degrees Fahrenheit. In the inland South Islands, we're talking about Lake Tekapo, Alexandra, Queenstown. That's 15 to 18 degrees Celsius, which is 59 to 64 degrees Fahrenheit. And finally, we're going to look all the way down to the southern New Zealand with Dunedin and Invercargill. And that will be around 15 degrees Celsius, which is around 59 degrees Fahrenheit. All right. Here we go. So that's what you can expect for the weather in New Zealand around February when it comes down to temperatures. We are talking about the weather in New Zealand in February, and right now we're going to talk about the average rainfall. So let's get started. Okay, so in New Zealand in February, there is still some rain, right? Misconception, it is summer in New Zealand, yes, but there is still some rain for sure because New Zealand always has rain because that's what makes our country so beautiful. So throughout New Zealand, you can expect quite a significant amount of rain around the country for sure during February. So let's go over what you can expect rain-wise. But let's first start about daylight hours because everybody tend to put daylight hours in the same boat as rainfall for some reason. So, yes, I don't know why. So, let's get started with, usually you are going to get sunrise around 6:30 a.m. and you're going to get a sunset around 7:30 p.m. and you're going to get a ton of rain. Let's get started with northern New Zealand. Okay, in northern New Zealand, Northland, Auckland and Tauranga, you can expect 110 millimeters of rain, which is about 4 inches if you use that system. In central North Island, which is Hamilton, Taupo, and Rotorua, you can expect around 80 millimeters of rain, which is about 3 inches. Southwest North Island, we're talking about New Plymouth, Palmerston North, and even Wellington. That's around 60 millimeters of rain, which is about 2 inches. Pretty sure we already had that yesterday. But moving on. In eastern North Island, in Gisborne, Napier, and Wairarapa, you can expect 60 millimeters of rain, which is about 2 inches. Let's move on to our beautiful South Island of New Zealand with Northern South Island with Blenheim and Nelson. Laura is having a blast. So this is the place. This is one of the places where you're going to get the least amount of rain, and that will be about 30 millimeters of rain, which is about 1 inches. In Western South Island, that's Westport, Hokitika, and the always drenched Milford Sound, we can expect 160 to 500 millimeters of rain, which is between 6 to 20 inches. That's a broad spectrum right here. In Eastern South Island, in Kaikoura, Christchurch, and Timaru, you can expect 40 millimeters of rain, which is 1.5 inches. In inland South Island, Lake Tekapo, Queenstown, and Alexandra, this is the driest it can get in New Zealand. That's February, and that is 20 millimeters of rain, which is about 0.8 inches. And finally, in southern New Zealand, Dunedin and Invercargill, without forgetting beautiful Stewart Island, that's about 60 millimeters of rain, which is about 2 inches. All right. Alright, so now what we're going to be doing is that I'm going to pass it on to Laura, so she'll be able to give you a few travel tips for New Zealand in February. She will give you about like 5 to 6 different tips to make your trip in New Zealand in February as easy as possible, and also something you really do need to know if you happen to travel to New Zealand in February. So without further ado, Laura, over to you.
All right, so number 1 tip for February is make sure you apply and reapply sunscreen. So the UV rays in New Zealand are really harsh. They're a lot harsher than in other countries, especially if you're coming from the northern hemisphere. A lot of people do notice that the UV rays and the getting sunburn is so much easier in New Zealand compared to other countries. So do make sure that you bring plenty of sunscreen and or cover up when you're out in that hot sun. Another tip is to make sure that you have insect repellent with you, or ways to basically make sure that you cover up from sandfly bites in particular. Sandflies leave a bit of an itchy bite and it's really uncomfortable and stuff. So, you know, you could easily avoid that with some nice insect repellent. We do have recommendations on nzpocketguide.com. Another tip is to make sure you book your accommodation and even your activities as far in advance as possible, basically in February, because this is the peak season for tourism in New Zealand, because it is sunny, nice weather, everybody's out, even the locals are traveling around the country as well. So you want to make sure, if you want to make sure that you have your first, your first choice in accommodation, the first choice in tour that you want to do, make sure that you do book whatever you can as far in advance as possible. Another tip, which is quite surprising for summer, is to make sure that you have an extra layer with you when you are out and about. The weather can change very suddenly, as people are experiencing in New Zealand at the moment. The weather can sometimes be quite unsummery as well. And, you know, when the rain comes down, that means the temperatures can be, feel a bit chillier. Having that extra layer with you, or even when the sun goes in, the temperatures really feel like they drop. So having those extra layers, having that rain jacket even with you in your day pack when you're out and about will really come in handy, trust me. And then finally, if you want to get away from the crowds, if you want to look for some places that are a bit less explored in New Zealand during summer, then look to places like Taranaki, Eastland, which is the Gisborne region, and Southland in the bottom of the South Island.
Nice, thank you very much, Laura, for all those amazing tips. Okay, so our favorite place or best places to visit in New Zealand in February. Let's get started with Laura.
All right, a really good place to go to if you want, beaches, place to go swimming, snorkeling, going on boat trips, that sort of thing, then the Bay of Islands is a great spot to go check out during February.
A bit of a cop-out, but very close to the Bay of Islands in the Northland region of New Zealand, there is the town of Whangarei. The town of Whangarei is really cool to visit in February because it gives you that nice little summer vibe. There is some amazing paddleboarding spots And you can also do scuba diving, and it's one of my favorite scuba diving spots in the whole country around the Pearl Night Island. If you're more into hiking, you can hike up Mount Manaya. Just be careful, if it rains, the stairways can be a little slippery.
I'm sure you have a story behind that, Robin. And it is on YouTube to watch, guys, if you want to check it out. Anyway, another really cool place, a completely different change of scenery. Go to Aotearoa Mountain Cook National Park, which is in the South Island. And here you'll see amazing mountains, which still have snow right on the mountain tops because that's where the highest mountains in New Zealand are. But it's usually better weather to do some of those mountain hikes that are usually unsafe to do if it is bad weather. And yeah, it's just really good weather and place to enjoy all those walks.
In the Hawke's Bay region on the North Island of New Zealand, you're going to get plenty of sunshine hours. It's actually one of the highest amount of sunshine hours, monthly in the country at that time of the year. Plus, on top of that, there is the Art Deco Festival happening in the small town of Napier, which is not to be missed. And yeah, if you want to sprinkle a bit of adventure there, you can add some mountain biking. There is some really great trail around there, and obviously February being, good weather is a good time to go and explore that. And if you feel like treating yourself, there is some amazing world-class wine tasting to do in the Hawke's Bay region.
And finally, right at the bottom of the South Island is the island of Stewart Island, which is about 80% of it is a national park. So it's a great place to get outdoors. There's many hiking trails, boat trips to do. And again, being summer, it's a great time to experience the highest temperatures that you're going to get on Stewart Island, because technically it is a subantarctic island. So it can be a bit chilly sometimes. But yeah, great place to get outdoors and enjoy the scenery.
Another thing that we want to share with you about traveling in New Zealand in February is obviously a packing list. There are some essentials that you cannot forget when traveling in New Zealand in February, and the travel expert, that is Laura, is going to cover that for you.
All right, so just a quick list of some sort of seasonal things to pack for your time during February, which is during summer in New Zealand. Of course, the number one thing you want to pack is high-factor sunscreen, and enough because you will be reapplying it quite a lot. Another thing to bring is insect repellent. Make sure that those pesky little sandflies don't bite you too much. Also some light clothing. So you want to have sort of clothing that not only dries quickly if it does rain on you, and then once it rains, the nice warm breeze will hopefully dry it out really quickly. So that's one reason for light clothing. But light clothing that covers up, your legs and arms is also a good way to protect yourself from the sun and from sandflies and mosquitoes as well. We also recommend taking at least one warm layer with you in your luggage to New Zealand, even when it is summer, when it is February, because those temperatures can change quite dramatically. Even between day and night, it can feel much cooler once the sun goes behind the clouds, because most of that heat really feels like it comes just from the sun rather than sort of the air temperatures. So yeah, make sure that you do have at least one warm layer, but probably a little bit more just in case. Of course, a rain jacket is another essential to bring, even in February, even in summer, because as you well know from the theme of this whole live show today, it does rain in summer in New Zealand. Hiking shoes, obviously, a lot of amazing outdoor experiences to be had in New Zealand. And yeah, having a good pair of hiking shoes or hiking boots if you prefer. Make sure that you are comfortable when you're out on the walking trails, or even just out and about doing some sightseeing. It usually takes you to a few shorter walks as well if you're not really into hiking. But yeah, just having a good pair of shoes, make sure that you're comfortable the whole time. And finally, swimwear. Whether you want to go swimming at the beach or having a dip in a nice refreshing lake, or even hot pools if you don't want to get too cold, there's lots of opportunities for swimming in New Zealand, especially during summer. But also if you want to do those adventure activities like whitewater rafting and canyoning, you'll need your swimwear for those as well. And that's it.